Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Prescott Unified School District Governing Board to order. We'll begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. Miranda, would you help us with that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. It's so nice to see all those smiling faces out in the audience. Thank you for being here. Next, we will move to the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions, suggestions for the agenda? Hearing none, could I get a motion?
I move that we consider approving the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Likewise, the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of September 13, 2022. Any corrections?
Motion that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of September 13th, 2022 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of September 13, 2022 as presented. All right, moving on. Oh, we do have to vote. I know how you're going to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. All right. Next item, we move into our presentations. And as we have been doing all year, we begin our presentations by recognizing some employee groups.
Did it again? Go the long way around.
I need the exercise. All right. So we actually are recognizing two employee groups this evening. The instructional technology group and the administrative and office assistants group. So we'll begin with the instructional technology group. You folks would like to come and stand up here? All of you. Don't be shy.
Either way. Wow.
This month, we continue to recognize our PUSD employees with two more employee groups. The first group is the much appreciated but occasionally disparaged instructional technology department. When our IT is working well, we tend either to love it or to take it for granted. But when it breaks down, we may panic, swear, or scream for IT. These folks either get to be heroes or scapegoats. But we recognize that making repairs isn't their only function. This is the department responsible for keeping track of updates and new technologies that make us more effective or efficient, and we truly appreciate their efforts. So thank you guys. If you would each just tell us your name and your position within the department, that'd be great.
I want to start with the most important one.
All right. Here.
No.
Go for it.
I'm Steve. I'm a level 1 tech.
Okay.
Jonah, also level 1 tech.
Dennis Hoffman, a network engineer.
Donnie Demers, systems engineer.
Dustin Franklin, IT Tech.
My name's Amelia Napier, and I'm a student worker.
And I'm Michael Napier, the IT director. Proud to have these guys.
As are we. Appreciate all you do. This you can hang up in your department.
And we will. With pride.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
When people enter our schools or district buildings, these are often the first and frequently the only people they see. These employees not only provide service for our customers, assist school and district staff and administrators in a wide variety of functions, and take on whatever duties no one else is assigned, but they are also our primary public relations agents. We so appreciate all that you do, often with little recognition, thus this ceremony. We have these representatives here tonight, so if all of you would come up and join us up here. The next item on our agenda is Kelsey Secor's instructional minute for us.
They're going to celebrate. Good evening, everyone. So for our instructional minute this month, I just would like to update you on our social studies curriculum adoption process. So there was a potential for us to bring a curriculum to you to consider this month, but instead we are going to postpone that. Our last meeting happened about a week and a half ago, and our teachers said, we really want more time. The committee wanted to spend more time planning lessons from the two curriculums that we had narrowed down to. So we're still deciding between McGraw-Hill and TCI as our two potential curriculum options. So our next meeting is scheduled on October 28th. We've met with both of the publishers. We actually met with them again this afternoon to get more questions answered as far as what they could provide for us and what that would look like for our classroom teachers. And so on the 28th, we will get back together and have our committee meeting. And if our grade levels are able to decide that this is for sure the curriculum that they want to move forward with, we will bring that to you at our next board meeting. So we're still in the process, but we're hoping in the next couple of months to bring that to you and to put it on public display. So any questions about social studies curriculum adoption?
Can you remind us who's on the committee?
Yes, so we have, I don't remember the number of people, but we have teachers K-12 on our team. We have administrators, we have board members, we have community members as a part of that as well, and parents are those community members. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Next, we have Andy Binder, principal of Mile High Middle School, who will talk to us about their program.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, board. Yes, my name is Andy Binder. I'm the principal here at Mile High Middle School. And wanted to share a little bit about what our school year is looking like so far and have a focus on our trilateral. I know you've all been presented about the trilateral before, but this is really what we base a lot of our actions on throughout the year. It's based around a real strong community of leaders in the school where we can all get together and talk about what our needs are. And so that's what I wanted to go over with you today. So I always like to start with this graphic. It really is, it's kind of like a mission statement, but it's what we developed as a staff, and it's what we're all about. You can see the big 4 areas there, and I won't go over them all in detail, but I think you'll see them represented in our trilateral and in this presentation, because this is what we really try to have Mile High focus on. I was at the board meeting last month, and I was glad to hear that, we talk a lot about academic achievement, and of course that's a really important component, but it's not the only thing. And so, everything from building strong, positive relationships between students, staff, and parents, that's a key part of what we want to be always thinking about. Go ahead.
Could we turn the light out? I'll be able to read that a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're creating those positive relationships, realizing that kids or students have a lot of different interests and backgrounds, and recognizing those and providing opportunities for those, whether that's through a variety of extracurricular activities or different types of exploratives or elective classes. Future focused is something that we really try to hit in the middle school level. We think it's a great age to get them thinking about their future, whether that's high school or beyond high school. And of course, like I said, academic achievement, which is what we're going to talk about a lot in this presentation. So our trilateral, I'll pass this around. So this, what you'll get here is a copy of our trilateral with both the big goals and kind of what we based it around, but also all the action steps that we put together, mainly in the spring and summer. But it's a living document that we really wanted to make sure that teachers or our staff are working to add to. But the primary goal there, the one that's in yellow, is a math-focused goal. I'm sure you've heard district-wide there was some concerns about math, and we decided as a district that we're going to all have a focus on math this year. So our goal was by this spring, both our 7th and 8th grade proficiency scores in Galileo math will be increased by 20% when compared with the same cohort groups proficiency from last spring. We spent a lot of time talking about should we be looking at proficiency versus growth, and we kind of concluded that there was no correct answer, but we felt like we wanted to make sure proficiency, the kids either they know it or they don't, and then by comparing it to with the same cohort of students, it kind of also looks at are they growing from year to year. So that's kind of the overall overarching goal. The 3 areas I think you might be familiar with, again, the trilateral process, but I'll kind of summarize the 3 here. Is we really wanted to make sure that we are looking at our systems school-wide, specifically with within our math department, that create a high-performance school culture, kind of making sure that what we're doing is creating an environment where kids can really learn. And that last one is kind of this idea of it's not just all falling on the math department, but it's a school-wide approach. If you look at the packet I just passed out, you'll see all the action steps on the left column, and then one of those columns kind of identifies, is this something that is kind of math department focused? Is this something that's more leadership focused, or is this an entire school focus? And we really wanted to make sure it wasn't just like, okay, good luck math teachers, I hope you guys figure it out. And we wanted to make sure that everyone was involved in this process. And so you can see those that are listed as a way that all staff, regardless of what they're teaching, can contribute to this overall goal. And then that last, I think it's the 3rd column there, talks about the leadership responsibilities. Again, that's something that comes from our balanced leadership training. But and then the last column there is kind of our progress, and we feel like we're doing pretty well considering it's just October. We've been able to hit a lot of these so far. We haven't started all of them, or we're kind of in progress on some of them, but some of them we really have had a great start to the school year. So you're welcome to look through them, but I'm going to highlight some of them in the next couple slides here. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is something we're calling our BLTs, our Balanced Leadership Teams. And I'll actually pass one more paper around. So our BLTs were, again, this idea that we wanted it to be a school-wide approach that, we've had committees in the past and they've done what they've done, but we really felt like there needed to be a focus on specific things in the trilateral, and we built these balanced leadership teams around them. And so these are obviously staff members working on that specific goal. They meet at least twice weekly or monthly. They also kind of have a task of not only developing some actions and taking action on some of the things in the trilateral, but also leading some of the professional development. So we've had some BLTs work together and then present to the rest of the staff. So the paper that I just handed out are the different BLTs, the Balanced Leadership Teams, and they cover a variety of things from school safety to our culture piece. We put our entire math department together so they could, since that was the focus, we didn't want to add to their plate, so they can really focus on all those math goals in the trilateral. So they meet in addition to the other times that departments get together. So again, I won't go over all of them, but each one of those has a focus area, and it's really, like I said, it's been a highlight so far. We've been meeting together. They've been bringing all sorts of great ideas to the campus so far. And we also restructured our leadership team. In the past, we've kind of just picked a couple teachers from each grade level, and that made up our leadership team. This year we said we're going to take the kind of leader from each of those BLTs, and that's going to make up our leadership team. And so then whenever we meet as a leadership team, we're also talking about these focus. So it's a lot all surrounding around the same goal of our trilateral. Any questions yet on the balanced leadership teams? Okay. So the biggest one that we obviously wanted to look at was all the areas around math. Math department collaboration. Obviously we've always had some math department collaboration, but we really focused this year on, we literally moved the classrooms all together, so they are just right next to each other, working together. Like I said, they are meeting weekly to look at all sorts of components, from intervention to common assessments, to just supporting each other in the classroom. My favorite story so far, one teacher from last spring, when I told him we were going to move his classroom so they could all be together, he wasn't the most crazy about that idea, didn't think it was necessary. He kind of said, oh, I can collaborate even if we're across campus, that's not necessary. And then within the first couple of weeks he said, I take back everything I said. I love being here next to the department and working together. We have I'm getting ahead of myself, but we have a math intervention teacher this year, and again, it helps to be right all around together. So school-wide support of a common goal, that's kind of that. I already talked about the column where all the other teachers and departments are also thinking in these terms, and it's one of these areas where we wanted to get established first as a first quarter, get the math department going, get the intervention piece. But the biggest thing that they're contributing to right off the bat here is we've created some win time. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. But win time is a time for students to get some extra intervention help, and it's very fluid, so the group that's receiving that support is changing on a kind of bi-weekly basis. Well, to make that work, to allow our math teachers to provide that during that certain time of day, that meant the other teachers had to have larger classes during that homeroom time. And so, but they were willing to do that. They took on these larger class sizes, knowing that it's kind of on paper only, because they'll have it on their roster, but then those kids get pulled to go to this intervention. So it's this school-wide approach. Math intervention and support is definitely something we've been working to get to the last several years, and feel like we're making big strides this year. we did hire a math intervention teacher, so that's a big first step, working with Shelley Reed. And so she's been helping a lot get that established. I mentioned the win time, which is, again, it stands for, I'll jump to it, what I need, which is, again, the students are assessed bi-weekly on a common standard. They're going through, the math teachers meet, they decide what standard they really want to focus on, they pull them the following week to really dig into it. I asked the teachers how it's going, and I wanted to read this one quote. It said, "During my first win time rotation, 80% of the students went from falling below the standard to meeting or exceeding the standard we covered. It's been a great way to help accelerate students that may have grade level gaps." And so it's very, like I said, focused, short. Some of the students get pulled repetitively from week to week, and others it's just a short time where they address a gap and then they go back to their other homeroom. Jumping back to this side again, we do have after school support. Again, one of the things on the trilateral is the math teachers kind of decided they're going to provide after school math support, tutoring. So twice a week they're staying after school to help students in that area. And they're also putting together a family math night, which is actually tomorrow night, that they're going to do just to provide a glimpse of what they do in class and different resources for families. So that's a little bit on the math side of things from the trilateral. A couple other highlights that I wanted to point out. Badger Boot Camp was something that we felt like we had a significant number of new staff coming in this year, and we wanted to make sure that those new staff were supported and brought into our community at the school, make sure that they understand not only just the procedures but best practices. So we had 9. We're at 7 teachers right now, 2 who have graduated. They graduated by basically demonstrating these are more experienced teachers who have shown they know a lot of these best practices, but they started off with the group, and the 7 who are still in Badger Boot Camp are again meeting regularly. They're also one of our BLT groups, so we're not overloading them with additional things. So some of the topics include classroom management, just general professional responsibilities, instructional strategies, things like that. So they become a group together, they feel part of the school, and they're getting some professional development support. Boy, that light is in a bad spot. It also builds a professional network. We really felt like they came in, they understand how to connect with each other. They're doing a lot of observations of other teachers, and even some teachers are coming in to observe them, learn from them. And this also provides opportunities for us, for coaches to get in classrooms to talk about strengths and weaknesses before it's too late in the school year and they've struggled for too long. It's been great because it also, some of our more veteran or experienced teachers, gives them a chance to be kind of a mentor to some of them as well. And we're hoping it also cuts down on or it increases teacher retention. So that's our Badger Boot Camp. So far, so good. We've been really pleased with how it's been going. One of the other things we talked about, this is definitely, well, it's connected to the math goal, but it's more on the culture side. One of the big things we felt, or that we saw last year as kids were coming back from online and all the problems with COVID, is they just did not feel as connected to the school, and that's when we were seeing more behavior issues. And so we wanted to create this kind of environment where they feel part of a group. And so we created these house competitions. It's kind of in the spirit of the Harry Potter houses, where they compete in different ways. Again, builds community. But we base the point system on things like positive behaviors. We do also give points based on academic achievements or overall group goals. We're not individualizing anybody's scores. And then there's, of course, just for the fun part of it, the group games, both physical and mental. Sometimes there's like little trivia contests and things like that. So just a kind of a school spirit thing, but it has been bringing our students together. Some other Mile highlights here. We started like that. This year we started our Mile High Ambassadors, which is a group that is their one and only goal is to help new students come to campus or when they arrive at campus. And so they meet them on the first day of school. They give them tours around campus. They give them all the details about the school and teachers. They sit with them during lunch, or they invite them to be a part of their lunch group. Like I said, they give them perspectives about the school and community. That's definitely a part of this. It's not just about the school. They actually have taken them on some downtown field trips. They're going on one tomorrow to the Elks Theater. We said we want them to feel like not just part of Mile High, but also part of the community as a whole. And of course, connecting them with other students. You know, if a student comes in and says, oh, I realize you're really into baseball, let me introduce you to the baseball kids. And so they have a connection there. So our Mile High Ambassadors has been a great student group. There we go. And then the last kind of change or something different is we do have a couple changes to some of our classes this year. And so the first two really are a little bit in response. Mr. Pemberton, of course, retired. He was teaching industrial arts. We tried really hard to replace him or find a teacher to replace that class. And we just didn't have any interest in that at the time. So we looked at some different options, and we created a digital media class that so far it's been really fun to see them in action there. We've had a broadcasting class that produces a daily video, but this is kind of another level. It addresses a wider range of kids, but it does everything from digital resources online, creating shorter little video clips, understanding the different ways. There's some podcasting happening, there's the editing. So a lot of that is incorporated into it, and then that class almost feeds the broadcasting class. We also have, we created an engineering design class. This is, it's basically a STEM class, but with a game focus. And so the students play a couple different like board game type of things, board or card games. They learn the different approaches. They create their own. They play each other's. They go that design process where you build a prototype and you test it out and then you go back to the drawing board. So that's kind of the idea around that class. And then the last one, life skills, certainly is not new, but we continually try to evolve that class. Those are just some of the topics that they cover in there. We definitely are trying to use that life skills class as a place for kind of transitioning both from Granite to Mile High and then Mile High to the high school. We kind of joke that the 7th grade life skills class is how to survive middle school, and so they learn everything from organizational skills to conflict to how to some digital safety issues, so they know what to do. And then the high school kind of picks it up and talks about what is next, what is high school like, what possible careers are out there. So a lot of focus on the future in the 8th grade life skills class. So those are just a couple of the newer classes. We're really proud of our other classes as well, but these are some of the changes that we made for this year. And I think that was everything that I wanted to share with you, but I'm sure there's some questions. So who else has some questions?
Dave, would you turn the lights back on? Thank you. Questions?
I have a few questions,
Yeah.
but I'll start from most recent information and trace backwards. I noticed the digital and
media?
online safety.
Yeah.
Is there also a literacy component in that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we actually have been using some of the common sense media curriculum around that. But yeah, digital literacy, digital safety is a piece that is in both 7th and 8th grade life skills classes.
Okay. The other question I had was, I'm looking at the goals related to math.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that, first of all, I just want to comment that I love moving everybody in proximity together when they're teaching common curriculum, because I think it leads to a more collaborative environment. So I'm happy to hear that experience came from someone who was perhaps resistant at first. And what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of goals that are centered around all. In other words, like the whole school is getting behind supporting math and these goals specifically, which I'm really encouraged to see. And I'm wondering if, on that note, can you speak to like direct instruction time, specifically as it relates to math? Do you think we're staying the same, increasing that, or decreasing that in this next school year?
Yeah, I would say it's increasing, and the reason it kind of goes back to that, the all piece. They have to spend, I mean, some time reviewing material. They have to spend some time. One of the other actions in there talked about reviewing, even for our honors kids, right, who may have, that was discussed, I know, at the last meeting as well, spending some time reviewing that. By kind of spreading that out a little bit, by using our other teachers, especially during the homeroom period, where they all are addressing some of those, they can cover some of those things, not all. I mean, some of the more basic, some of the review. It does free up a little bit more time in the classrooms. The other piece of it is the intervention teacher being part of this process and being able to, again, pull small groups. So the rest of the teachers can focus on the curriculum and not having to go back and fill in the gaps that they might otherwise, the other students might not have had to do. So.
And do we, okay, so I'm hearing that we're increasing direct instruction time as related to math.
I would say, yeah.
Okay. And then paired with that is then my question of, is there a sense from the students in terms of having this math focus? How are they feeling about that? Is that encouraging for them? Is it seamless where they don't even really notice that we're making this shift, or is something lost because there's finite,
Right, sure.
time in
Only
a day?
a certain amount of time during the day, right. So I don't think they probably notice. I think the ones that probably notice the most are the students who are in one of those intervention classes specifically, which means they do potentially lose one of their electives. We do have it set up right now where every student has 2 periods of the day to have an explorative or an elective class, and so if they are in one of those intervention classes, they would only have 1. But often they know it's necessary, or their parents understand it's necessary, and so so there's that. And then part of, and Shelley's going to, I know, talk about intervention as well, but one of the things that we've been doing is having our intervention teacher both in a push-in and a pull-out model, where sometimes they're in the classroom supporting, again, instead of the teacher trying to do everything for everyone, they can split it up a little bit. So I don't think they notice a big difference, but I feel like it's covered through that intervention.
Okay, my last question, just related to these trilateral goals, is there is these leadership-specific goals, and
Right.
you spoke to that balanced leadership team and how that's composed of different teachers.
Right.
But I also see things on here, whether it's like hire an interventionist, and so could you speak to just administration's role in supporting these trilateral goals specific to math? In other words, does administration play a critical role in delivering quality education specific to math this year?
I would definitely say yes. The biggest piece is one of the things I talked about right at the beginning is creating those systems, and we really worked hard this year to create not just the physical space, but the structure where our Fridays, we also added Wednesday afternoons as a kind of dedicated, protected time for meeting and making sure that either one of the BLTs or one of the departments are meeting. But things like that, where you're creating the structure and the systems to ensure that the math department can meet and can have that time. Without that, it kind of turns out into a lot of good ideas that no one has time for. I feel like already we've had some, all the way back to the spring and over the summer, there's always trying to figure out the best schedule, the best way to use each of our teachers. Some have strengths in certain areas, and So there's been a lot of, okay, I had a conversation with somebody today, right, about, okay, I think we're going to shift some stuff around because I feel like you do better with this group and you're going to be better with this other group. And I feel like those are the things that will chip away at those bigger goals that we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
I just have maybe two,
Okay.
maybe. So I understand you answered Sarah's question about the students being pulled in the intervention time. And just, have you had specific negative feedback about students being pulled from those elective courses for math intervention? Has that been an issue at all?
So we haven't for that, not for math
Okay.
intervention. Usually the students who are in there, again, really, they either understand or the parents understand. And again, the fact that they still get another class for electives is created that where that hasn't been an issue. We have had some pushback on the win time because they're being pulled from homeroom, which, as you saw, some of that is kind of the fun activities. So we adjusted pretty quickly to, one of the things, we have a broadcasting class and they do a daily video. And so when they were being pulled for win time, they were missing out on that video and they wanted to see their friends on the video. And so, again, we made an adjustment. Okay, how can we still get as much time for math or win time without the kids not wanting to go because they're missing some of that fun thing. So we adjusted. We've put all the fun homeroom time into a time when it doesn't hit. So things like that we've had to adjust. But other than that, not for the bigger intervention classes.
Okay. And then, kind of with that in mind, when do you expect to have an idea, I guess, of the impacts of this? Is it going to be at the next Galileo assessment, or do you think it's more at state assessment time?
We really wanted to avoid that of not knowing anything until the end of the year. And so that's why when we built in our schedule that it was, they're meeting weekly, they're providing these short little assessments along the way to see and catch them with this win time. Or maybe it's not even during the win time, it's just in regular class time. We had, I think it was last Friday's PD day, right? That was last Friday, right? Yeah, it seemed like that. But that, one of the things that was covered with our math department was a training on small group instruction, so they can use that data and go, okay, we found that out last week, we're addressing it this week, instead of, again, waiting for months and months to go. Obviously, there's end of module assessments that will give an overall for the whole module, but we really built this schedule and the structure in order to know much more frequently.
Yeah, hopefully that's trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
From that data that you're collecting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's that balance of, we don't want to over-test, we don't want to get to that point, but we also want to make sure we are getting information early enough.
Sure. And then the last thing is the game design sounds extremely interesting. And are you involved with any outside agencies to try to enhance that at all, or?
Not yet, but I'm all ears. So
I know there's a degree program at Embry-Riddle, and they probably have students that would be excited to share what they know.
Yeah.
If that's a possibility.
I think that'd be great. Yeah, when Ryan James is the one teaching that class, and when we were brainstorming it this summer, there was a lot of possibilities on where we could take this, and everything from obviously like I said, the STEM and in design process, but also there could be art design for what a game cover would look like, to marketing, how would you go about it? So there was a lot of potential with this, and obviously it's the first year, so we're starting small.
There's I think a lot of real world potential. CTED may want to be interested in doing something along those lines too, because there's a lot that can be done along those areas.
And obviously it's a pretty engaging class, so I have a feeling the kids are going to be pretty interested in taking it year after year.
Plus, do I understand Mr. James has designed and sold a game?
He has. He's done that himself, so that's why we went to him.
Thanks.
I just have one little thing. When
so we're concentrating on this. Do you think if we don't meet this goal of 20%, like, I know we've had some concerns about the math curriculum that we're using. When might it be put on us to maybe change that to help along with this process?
The curriculum you're talking? I think that would be
I think it's like 2 more years down the
broader
line
conversation with,
to see if this helps, or?
yeah, I mean, I think, one, as much as we can keep stability with teachers, we've had some math turnover, and I know that's contributed to it. But I think the broader conversation of getting the other schools involved, saying what are we seeing, we've done these steps, is it leading to success, or is it a curriculum issue? I think they would be the one to really be able to answer how much of it is curriculum versus some other concern. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to put a timeline on it, because I think there's a lot of people that would need to.
Is that something, Kelsey, that we are kind of looking at in the background,
Oh,
keeping in the back of
absolutely.
our minds?
Yes, so that is on our radar, and it's something that we are looking at very closely. But Andy's right. I mean, there's been some turnover in teachers, and we also have some learning gaps from COVID years that we need to take into consideration as well. Right now, we are actually working with ADE. We've been in communication with them a lot, trying to get them to come up and do some training with our curriculum on how, like the types of questions that students are asked, to set them up for success when it comes to the state assessment, but also to get into those higher level thinking types of questions to make sure our teachers know how to do that and how to present that to students, and how to help them work through that. So we're working through that piece, but we're looking at that data all the time. And we're also going to bring in some training for our middle school teachers in particular, because they've had so much turnover that they were not part of that initial training when we rolled out Engage New York. So we want to get them trained first on how to use that curriculum, because once they have that training, then we'll know, is it really a curriculum issue, or is it not really understanding how to use all of those pieces of the curriculum?
And one more piece where, like you mentioned, a district-wide look at this. We're taking a look at some of the feeding that goes, it's not all the middle school. Some of the acceleration that we have done in the past may be causing some gaps, and you've probably seen some of that in your time too. So that's a big piece where we're looking district-wide at it.
One other thought on the curriculum, it's so broadly used across the United States, we could probably easily get some data to see if that's causing issues at other schools. And if it's a curriculum issue, we should be able to find some hard data to confirm that. If it's not a curriculum issue, at the same time, we ought to be able to find data from other schools that suggests the problem's not the curriculum per se, it's implementation, it's teacher turnover, it's other things like that.
And that is a piece that we are looking at as well. So now that state scores have been released for last year, we are going to look at districts that are highly performing in math, and in particular in middle school math. Statewide, those scores are really low. So we want to find what districts are, what are they using for curriculum who are high performing in that, and see, is it curriculum, is it how they're teaching it, is the strategies, what are they doing to be successful. So that's another piece that we are definitely looking at.
Okay, cool.
Sometimes we think it's hot because we're wearing a sweater, but it turns out it's hot because we're in Phoenix. So we need to look and see what the root cause is.
Andy, I have a couple questions
Yes.
too. How did, or what information did you guys use to determine what areas you were going to focus on in math?
So that, I'm going to go back to our kind of win time again. They looked at last year's state data. They looked at the post-test and the pre-test from Galileo. We got that info not too long ago, and we went through, and there's absolutely some areas that jump out at us. But and so those are the ones that are spiraled in as much as possible. But the biggest thing they're doing is that those biweekly assessments, right? Yeah. They're going through, they're looking and saying, they're right there. That's a problem we're seeing this group is having an issue with. So taking into account the past assessments, but putting a little bit more weight on the current. Yeah.
Which is definitely a good idea. I also am curious, you have lots of action steps. How did you determine what you wanted to do for action steps? How did you choose those?
That was our trilateral team. When we got together and we came up with the big goals, we sat down with them and said, how do we get there? We very intentionally said this is a living document, right? This is flexible. So that started back in June. We met again in July. We talked about what was doable, actionable, measurable right off the bat. And then we took that as kind of our starting point and then handed it over to a lot of our BLTs and said, here's what we've started with. Now what else do you see? And then got even more perspectives in on that. So that's how that was initially formed, kind of initially, and then.
Those June meetings, you may remember.
Yeah, I know.
The whole district does that, and we're going on about a decade of that right now.
Yeah.
Before everybody leaves for summer, we hit the data hard.
And I know that the teams are developing those, but I'm kind of curious where they got the ideas for them. Did they look at high-performing districts? Did they look at best practices? Did they look at something else to help them decide what might be good action steps?
I think in the math area, there was a lot more of that. There was looking at, again, at the data. We looked at some of the, what am I saying, like articles and different things that we saw that talked about certain strategies. So we read more of that. Some of the other ones on culture was based more on experience and the Capturing Kids' Hearts trainings and things like that. But as far as some of the math strategies, that was more on doing a little research, finding out what was the best practice and what would work to address some of these needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Can I ask, so from my understanding, the biweekly assessments are just to make sure that the students are making progress, but what is it being pulled from? Is it from like the Galileo test content, or
Good question.
what is it coming from?
Yeah, those are teacher-created assessments based on the lessons from the past 2 weeks. So they're again, that's part of what we're doing on those meetings. They're meeting together, going, here's what we've covered. What is the key standard or concept that we want to assess? They create an assessment around that idea. Most of them are short assessments, but enough to get information on where they're at, and then they look at that data and plan their intervention the following week.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you.
Sandy.
Good presentation.
All right, next, you know that we have been using an intervention coordinator in the district this year, Shelley Reed, so she's going to tell us how that's going.
How are you guys tonight?
Great.
Good.
I like her chair over there.
That's pretty nice.
Right?
It's hard to beat.
So hello, I'm Shelley Reed. I'm the district intervention coordinator. What do I press on this?
To the right, and then press on.
Nice.
It's a new position that was approved last year. And just a little bit about me, I've been in education for 20 years, 15 of those with PUSD. I was a fourth grade teacher for 13 years, and math interventionist for a year, loved that. Instructional coach for 7 years, and now the district intervention coordinator. It's been very fun, a great opportunity. I took this directly from the job description that was, developed last year. I look at that job description a lot because while it was very detailed, had lots, to it, it is sort of an evolving kind of position. But basically, I work with principals and teachers. I work alongside instructional coaches and help schools and teachers implement interventions. And so they can be classroom interventions, tier 1 interventions. They can be school-wide interventions or strategies. I think if you look at this, the last bit of it, implementing and follow-up, is the biggest, I think, role that I can play, supporting principals and teachers. If you think about everything that's on their plate, if I can help them and come alongside and kind of be the eyes and ears for intervention, so I really enjoy that. So you know, a lot of times we have great plans and then you have to put out fires and different things come up. So I kind of like to, you know, I can keep my eye on that intervention ball. So there's a lot I'm doing, and working K-12 is very fun, and it's keeping track of a lot of stuff, and it doesn't look the same at every site. So I kind of came up with some maybe highlights for this first quarter. The first thing is kind of this realization as working with the different sites. We do need to revisit our MTSS process again, and MTSS is multi-tiered systems of supports, and it's our way of supporting students. But at our schools, we kind of, for the most part, they're doing the same thing, but it might look different. The forms might be different. The information isn't necessarily traveling from school to school. And so we're looking at streamlining that process. When I talk to teachers, they would like it a little bit easier for them so that they can do that along with everything else they're doing. Also enhancing the effectiveness of interventions, looking at you know, the research-based interventions, what really works, what do these students need, and then the last part, developing that framework for teachers to do interventions in their class. COVID was brought up a little bit. There are some gaps that we're seeing related to that, and so students in your regular classroom, when you have a class of, you know, 25 kiddos, you might be seeing a lot of different kinds of gaps and interventions that need to take place, and so kind of developing something to support teachers in that process. Secondly, I've been working at Mile High. I love my work there, and I'm working with the math interventionist that Andy mentioned. We work on looking at our schedule. He mentioned pushing in to classrooms or pulling out small groups. So her and I meet weekly and we talk about how it's going, what kind of things she needs support with. We took STAR Math to the middle school, and STAR Math is part of our Renaissance of suite of assessments, and STAR Math, it's a beautiful thing. So we're doing it in one of those classes for 19 students. Gives you these great instructional reports. You can do an instructional report for the whole class, for a group of students, or for an individual student. And STAR Math is different from Galileo because it's adaptive. So a student, if they're in 7th grade, they take the test. It starts them out at that 7th grade level. And it kind of, based on their answers, if they're getting them right or wrong, it will level them out. And then it spits out this fabulous report that will tell you they have a gap here. They need help in here. They need more support here. And so then using that with Galileo, which is more standards-based, it's great using those two together. So we're working on that. We're utilizing Zern. That is something that we're looking at K-8 anyways, to help leverage Zern in a classroom so you can pull a small group, so you can maybe support a student who has some gaps, or even for students who need enrichment. It's a program that's kind of versatile that way. And then at the high school, that's where my office is, so I get to hang out with the big kids. So it can be intimidating sometimes. They're pretty tall, right? They're taller than Adam. They're big guys. I'm working with the instructional coach there to conduct some data meetings. We're supporting teachers in their implementation of interventions. They have an intervention Friday. And then that follow-up support, again, kind of like, what does it look like? Where can we help you? And so those are kind of the biggies that we're working on right now. MTSS, we're going to start that second quarter, that committee. It's a large committee. And my hope is to get it kind of dialed in a couple quarters, spend the last quarter of the school year rolling it out and being ready to kind of hit the road running next year. Any questions?
I have a question, and this kind of pairs with the Mile High presentation. I see a lot of goals that are data-driven and kind of working in that, like, diagnosis and then planning afterwards.
I also see goals related to communication, whether that's with specific families of students that might need additional intervention, or whether that's like school-wide with math nights, or so I'm curious, do you have a role in some of that communication? And if so, like, what does that look like when you're having, how's that going?
How's it going?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, from site to site, my role is kind of dependent upon what they need. And sometimes that is communication with parents or the community. Is that what you're specifically asking, like,
Yes.
for the parent side?
Yes.
What I have noticed for the most part in all the schools that I'm working with, they have it down with their newsletters and those kinds of things with that communication piece. Occasionally when I'm working with a teacher, there might be a one-off kind of email, like, what do I do with this? And I help with that. I am working with Rhett Buller, who's in Title I grants and kind of oversees that, in kind of streamlining our communication with the interventionists, and what that looks like, even communication with the teachers. What are you doing in intervention, and then communicating with families, your child is receiving this support and those kinds of things.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And maybe just a follow-up on that. One thing that I was thinking about is I heard you share about kind of working closely, okay, pulling them out for win time during this video. Maybe we can strategize differently between when we go in and when we pull out. And I know that right now there's a very deficit-oriented conversation around math intervention and just math in general. And so can you speak to, I don't know, I don't want to say like the positive communication that's happening, but maybe like how we're creating a culture around lifting up the strengths of students that might be falling behind, or, you know, not tracking with grade level or failing. Yeah, just what does some of that communication look like?
Right, that's a good point, because as a classroom teacher, I was always that asset-based kind of thinking, right? And then you get into interventions, and that's the first thing you want to do, because you want to support the students. You're like, where are they lacking? From my experience, the communication that comes from the schools is always that way, leading with, this is what's going well, this is what's going on, and this is where we're going to come in and support. And I think that the same goes when we talk with teachers and supporting teachers, and what's working well, and where can we, where can we support, or where can we help? But I mean, that's a good question. And that's interesting you brought that up, because like I said, now I'm living in this other world almost, because we're always, they need help. And but just in my experience with the teachers that I'm working with this year and the administrators, it's always leading with asset-based. Maybe behind the scenes is when we're talking about, this is what we need to do and this is where we need to go.
And a lot of the conversation has switched. And when you're talking about, the gaps in learning, it's growth mindset is what our teachers are living right now. So it's not you just don't have this, it's you don't have it yet. So let's together, how can we work to get you where you need to be? So it's a very supportive piece. But also our teachers are working on student agency, where they are setting goals and they are helping students feel successful along the way. And so it's all a big process that they're working through, but they're trying to get them more involved with looking at data, celebrating those successes, but continuing to set goals for themselves to continue to push them forward.
Shelley, how much of your, is any of your work based off of behavioral issues? Do you have interventions on behavioral issues with students coming in?
That's another good question, because it's, I think my role is more focused on the academic interventions. However, behavior comes into play a lot, and so you have to address those things. And so with the MTSS committee that we're looking at, we've talked about that yeah, we're trying to focus on how to help students academically, but we're bringing in people on that committee like Jesse Stickle and those kind of, because we do have to address that too. Those are other supports, and often students act out when they're not getting something academically, and vice versa.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, because it seems to me that students may misbehave as a result of not performing academically.
For
or
sure.
vice versa, you know, they may not,
Yeah.
they may perform academically, but they feel a need to misbehave
Well, and
to
bringing
make
that to,
themselves seen.
yeah, to the attention of teachers sometimes too is, hey, you know, check this out first, you know, they're
Yeah.
misbehaving, is it because they need more support here?
Right. And I guess, is that a communication piece that goes to parents? I guess I'm thinking more at the elementary level, but it could be at any level. Are parents informed when there's a communication from you or your team that this may have a behavioral issue, or there is a behavioral issue that we need to address as well with your child?
I would kind of go back to the other, like at the schools, they are addressing the
Okay.
behavior with parents.
Individually,
Yeah.
like teacher to teacher? right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that will be a part of the MTSS process as well, because there is a parent communication component to that.
Okay.
When students are involved in that intervention process, whether it's behavior or academic, we do always notify parents. And so they'll come up with a very consistent plan for that within MTSS, but it addresses both behavior and academic.
Okay.
Including if it's a function of an IEP as well.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What part of your job do you spend the most time on?
That's a good question too. It's really, I'm meeting with a friend tomorrow, and we're gonna kind of talk about this role, and I was trying to think, can I summarize it? And it's exciting because it's K-12, and so I would say I'm trying to spend more time at the middle school and the high school, because that is where I didn't spend as much time in my other, you know, when I was an instructional coach, I was at all the elementaries as well as Granite Mountain. And so with my office being there, but I would say overall, if I had to pick a thing, it's data.
Okay.
It's looking at data, helping teachers look at data, looking at data with Renee, and Kelsey, and those kind of big picture things,
Yep.
and being up on the data to help teachers use that data to help, you know, do the best intervention possible.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah, no problem, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is current events. Joe?
A couple things I want to talk about regarding the future. Does anyone remember that little conversation we were having about building a high school? We're still having that conversation. So this is, we've been working behind the scenes with architects, kind of digging into our schools, but this is about to kick into gear, and we're about to start looking at the yellow section, which is a visionary committee. So we're about to look for 25 to 30 parents, students, community members, teachers, to really dig in and take a look at what we've come up with the architects, which is we have all of these campuses, and we have, we look deeply at enrollment, and it's really neat to work with folks who do this for a living all the time to look at, if you just wiped all the Legos off, there are a lot of options and ways to look at things. And the last time we did this was when we closed 2 schools, and our community got real creative with us to come up with how we do things now. So I think we're about to enter into a conversation like that with our community. And then also, we're going to start that in November. And that's why I bring this up, because that's going to happen pretty soon here. And we'll keep the board very updated. But in between those visionary meetings, which will be once a month, we will be having open community meetings where the community can come and hear what we're talking about and what some of those brainstorm ideas are. The architects have come up with like 8 ideas of how you could reconfigure our schools if you sold one, or you did this, or you did that. And remember, we have some property that's being donated to us by the James family out by Deepwell Ranch. So we've also been looking at how the airport overlays are affecting that, and we think we're in pretty good shape with that. But it's really that time where we just dig in as a community and brainstorm. And then, like I said, we'll invite the whole community in between those meetings to keep everyone updated. And at some point, there will be some type of proposal that the board will be involved with. And, you know, there's a lot to this. And so at that point, the board will have to see where we're at in terms of looking at going to the voters and asking if they want to sell Mile High Middle School. Part of this work with the architects too is they're looking at the marketability of Mile High, and we've had lots of interest of that in the past. but it's really neat to look at it in a scientific way here. So we're right now putting the committees together. We're working with principals, and so it's one of those bigger committees. We're looking at 25 to 40 people. So, but it should be a very exciting process, and we'll keep you posted on that. So. It's a neat topic, and it's an interesting one, because when you dive way into the future, it's hard to realize whether it's going to happen or not. There's a lot of things that would have to come together, but this is a long-term discussion. So excited to bring that back to the community. And then just a quick update on our Taylor Hicks Teacher Village. We've understand that the grant money came down from ADE. That's that matching grant. It's in the county hands now, and there's some red tape to work through there, I think, including creating a process for us to apply. But we feel like we're ready to go. And I want to thank Clark Tenney and the city of Prescott, and a whole bunch of people have really dropped what they're doing to try and move this to a forefront here, so that we could be ready for a matching grant. So we'll keep you posted on that as well. I think that's pretty exciting news. And I wanted to talk about homecoming, but I heard Miranda probably has a little more details on that. So we'll get to that in a minute.
All right. Any board members with anything you want to share?
I just wanted to share that I had the privilege to attend the Prescott Education Foundation annual fundraiser, the Sip and Savor, this last month. And not only was it incredible to see the outpouring of financial support for kids, staff, teachers in our district, but it was also wonderful to just feel the energy of having individuals of all different backgrounds, whether they have kids in the district or not, just all turning out for a common cause, which is supporting the district in innovation and filling in some of those funding gaps. So it was a wonderful event. I think there was a record-breaking sum at the end, so hopefully we'll see that channeled back into the district over the next year.
I was able to, the same night, was able to attend the Margot Fontaine Academy of Ballet Gala, which was held that Saturday, the 23rd September. It was amazing. I'm not a ballet guy, but the caliber of the people that they brought in for this event was incredible. And if this is any indication of the effect that this group is going to have on our schools, I think we're really well set as a partner with them. I also attended the Salute to Educators that the Chamber of Commerce put on, which was really good. I wish more people had been able to go to that. I was able to visit Prescott High School on the next morning, and talk with Missy Townsend about our 40th reunion, which is coming up this weekend, along with 2 other classes that are having reunions. So this is a big deal, and I bring it up because I think it's really important that that the community knows that people are coming back for their class reunions, and they're going to the high school, they're going to games, going to homecoming that Miranda's going to talk about, and it's really exciting and interesting, and there is a real connection to the high school and to PUSD with people from all over. So it's great to discuss those things, talk about it.
That Sunday, too, was the Rotary's Grapes for Good, where they were also raising money for the schools. And so it is so heartening to see our community come out in support of the schools. So, anything else? Okay, Miranda, go for it. Woo.
Okay, so recently we had our NHS induction, which was on September 21st on a Wednesday, and Mia over here, who is a representative of that organization, she set up a really, really great ceremony, and I was inducted along with 16 other students, and it was just a really nice event. So Mile High has a marching festival, had a marching festival for 8 marching bands that participated in performing, and apparently there was a really great turnout. I didn't get to make it to that one, but it was supposed to be super nice. And then ASVAB testing for all PHS juniors is taking place on October 19th. And then the infamous homecoming week is this week. So yesterday we were supposed to have a parade and a bonfire down by Mile High, but that was canceled because of the rain. The dance is tomorrow night at 6:30, and then there's a homecoming football game, which is a home game this Friday against Sierra Linda. One that really speaks to me is a lot of seniors have been getting help from their advisors within the last few weeks. We've been pulled out for just a few minutes during a class period or during a passing period, and we've been able to get a few flyers and handouts, and it covers like the FAFSA advisement for filling that out, the Common App, the just like different things that otherwise you'd have to Google or, you know, hopefully have a parent help you through, but we've actually had the opportunity to have advisors talk us through that and go through graduation credits and make sure that we're on track for graduation. So that really helped me personally, so I can assume that that probably helped a lot of other seniors too. There's a blood drive this Thursday from 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. in the small gym, and that's being sponsored by the Air Force JROTC and Native Air. And then recent events have been Stuco fundraisers at Chipotle and Prescott Creamery to just support each high school class. And then there's been a lot of volunteer opportunities for different service hours and club things, such as like Badger Buddy lunches, and there's been the environmental club cleanups and just different things to get students more engaged in the community. Also, fall sports have been doing a lot of fundraisers just to raise money for uniforms, and they've all been competing very well.
Very thorough, Miranda. Thank you very much.
On that note too, one other thing that I got to go to this last week was the Abaya Judd Carnival. So another great community event where parents and kids were there. It was a lot of fun. I didn't get to go in the bouncy house. I was too big. But, you know, that's how it goes. But lots of kids playing, and parents were there, and a lot of, there was a raffle, lots of great things going on. It was really good.
I had gone to Donuts for Dads and Dudes at Taylor Hicks, and it was a huge turnout. They had to go for another load of donuts and still ran out. It was huge. It was really very encouraging.
Deb, I was talking with their PTA president. They expected about 25 people to show up to that. They had over 130.
Yeah.
So dads are making a comeback in PTA.
And there were a lot of dudes too.
Yep.
That weren't dads, but it was very encouraging. So, all right, moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions related to the consent agenda? Okay, could I get a motion?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Sarah, do we have any requests for public hearing? All right, then we're moving into our
Thunder meeting?
updating of the progress of capital improvements through our bond and override with Brian.
Hi. Every year at this time between September and the end of October, if you are operating a bond or an override or both, you need to do a presentation of the previous year and a little bit, well, we do a little extra and forecast what it's looking like for the upcoming years. And so this is my yearly presentation. Just so that there's a little history context, we had our bond that was passed in 2015. It's a $15 million bond to do capital projects. That's improvements to campuses. It's stuff, buying technology, which we went through, and we did our last issuance in 2020. So every 2 years you do an issuance, and you have 3 years to spend that money. And so we had one in the first year for $7.5 million, then just under $4 million, and then the last issuance was a little over $3 million. We have to spend the rest of our money by this upcoming April 30th. And so we'll have every dime accounted for and every dime spent. So far, up through June 30th of the last fiscal year, we've spent $13,187,926 of that bond money. This is also a review, part of our planning for the bond and our communication to the voters is that we would have a bond oversight committee, met very often, and especially in the beginning stages. And so after the last issuance, when we've gotten under $2 million, we haven't met because we got directive from that group of where we wanted to spend the money, which I'll go over. And we're at the finish line. Just also a reminder, we had a voter pamphlet that broke it down into 5 major categories, 4 of them being non-administrative, 1 being administrative. They were technology upgrades through the district, energy management. It was actually over a $4 million project that we looked at our lights, aerators in our faucets to save money, and we have seen the benefit of that by our carry forward going up and us being able to lean on our carry forward to give raises because we have been so energy conscientious through this initiative, and we've saved on our utility bills. The third category was instructional, that's being the sites, building and grounds renovations and upgrades and renovation and maintenance. Pupil transportation, and last but not least, there was a slice of it for administrative building, and actually we are sitting in the fruits of that category because it was 100% spent on the renovation of Washington Traditional School for the district office. Questions on the history of it? Because now we'll get into last year and what's up for upcoming. It's exciting stuff. And I didn't even know how to do that, and it actually did it on its own. I want to say that transition thing. Seriously, I didn't do that. All right, so just kind of what we have spent from that 2016-17. Those are those categories. And so this is my pie chart of the percentage we have spent of that 13 million. And you can just kind of go through. You can see on the pamphlet, we did say we'd spend about $700,000 for technology, and after the bond passed and through technology assessments, it was way under estimated how much technology money we needed, but there are provisions within a bonds that each issuance, there can be 10% of the issuance money that can go and flow between categories, and so technology has been almost doubled on what we said we would spend. So that's $13 million. Any questions on it? Cara?
I assume the next slide is you're going to tell us what you're going to do with the last 2.5 million.
Keep you in suspense. That's what we're doing. All right. Last year, we didn't have a lot of expenditures. We did have a couple technology upgrades, buying some SSDs as the solid state drives for computers that had failed and needed new hard drives. Paging, a couple modules to there. We do have a QZAB loan fee of $1,500 that we pay for that because of the energy management 0% loan we have. Some building up. The exciting one, number 3, is that we relocated a power line and got a new power line pole. So that was exciting. But it was for the new tennis courts. And so the new tennis courts are going in. We paid about $68,000 last year for those courts, but they will be done hopefully in the next 4 weeks and will be playable. It's post-tension concrete, which will survive an earthquake. Nothing else will remain, but the track and the tennis courts will still be playable. So 1st of November, they should be done. And I'll show you what that total cost is at the high school. Then some security camera upgrades at Taylor Hicks because there was some vandalism and some blind spots that our system wasn't covering. No new transportation vehicles, nor any administrative buildings. Oh, Cara, this is your slide.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a remaining balance of about 1.5 million as of July 1st. We already have 2 buses that we've ordered, so those are about $370,000. The rest of the tennis courts to finish it is just under 700,000. After those two already encumbered items, we'll have about 500,000 to spend. And we may ask for get another bus, because that would put our whole fleet up to within 7 years being new. We still have one that is a 2006 bus, instructional technology, and then brainstorming with our district leader team if there's any last ditch things that need to be done at the campuses that we want to spend on a bond. And all money has to be spent by April 30th, or we get penalties that are not good. That's upcoming here. Let's talk about the override. After this year, we get no money. That's it. 700, 300, we're getting $1 million. Voters didn't support it. And so last 2 years, it's went down by a third, until the last third is this year of $382,000, and it's gone.
Brian, can you remind us what the override was largely used for and how we're backfilling that?
100% it went to salaries increases for staff. All staff got a 5.1% raise. And so when it did not get continued, we did not decrease our staff's salaries by 5.1%. We budgeted for that. Once again, our energy savings and our frugal nature of spending has been able so that we didn't have to do that. But going into this year, this is the first time our carry forward has gone down, which we want it to become a reasonable number, because it is a high carry forward. But it went down, which means we continue our spending as it is. We'll see it continue to go down because we have reoccurring expenses more than what our M&O budget is. So we lost $1 million, and now we're seeing the effects of it.
I don't think you'd find very many districts that are at or near the state average teacher pay that don't have an override.
Absolutely not. In fact, the teacher average is because there is an assumption that your voters will support, and it's the reason why charter schools get more per pupil than school districts, because they don't have a voting base, so they get more per pupil because it's assumed if they went out for an override, they would get it, so they get the money automatically.
Get it anyway. And we always respectfully said this was a tiny override.
It was. It was
helped
only
a
a
lot
4.6% override, and we could have went for an up to a 15% override. So we could have given almost a 15% raise. Now, luckily, we didn't. Only because when it didn't continue, I don't think we could have absorbed a 15% overrise or losing $3 million because it wasn't continued.
That would have been hard.
Yes, it would. Any comments or questions? I think this is the last one because our override's gone and our bond is expended. So this is the time to say you've been so excited every September or October to see these presentations.
I would like to thank the community for the money they provided that allowed us to make all those improvements in our buildings, to provide new buses and instructional technology and money for our teachers and so on. So I do appreciate the community stepping up. Be ready.
It was a difference maker in our campuses.
It really took us from facilities that were a mess to facilities that were solid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think maybe what I'll suggest, if the governing board next year would like, is for next year to do a overview of all of the things that we've done, including the paving of all the campuses and things like that, that we don't get that money from the states. You have to go through school facilities boards, but it has to be broken before they'll give you the money, and they don't do things like paving and tennis courts and tracks and things like that. So that's what my suggestion would be 1 year from now.
I also think, I'd love to thank the Oversight Committee as well, because I know that it's a lot of money, and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars is important, and I think that they did a good job of having that oversight.
Yeah. And it was a good group.
One of them's here, Dave.
Yeah,
Clever.
Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
I mean, it really was. I mean, you brainstorm before for these categories, kind of come up with an idea before the vote of what it's going to look, and then when rubber meets the road and the money, then it becomes real, and we have to hold to our promises to the community. And I think we very much did that. The first round of projects, we accomplished every single thing going into the vote that we said that we would accomplish. And it was a small bond. We can bond, I think our bonding capacity is $180 million. This was 15.
But that boss committee had a passion for technology and pushed hard in a respectful way to make sure we got to where we needed to be, and we got there.
Brian, can you help me with something? I'm trying to remember, because of the total property values in the Prescott area versus, say, Chino Valley and Humboldt and whatnot. If I'm recalling correctly, even with our moderate bond and override, the total amount of my percentage, I should say, of my property taxes that went to Prescott Unified School District was lower than our neighboring districts who didn't have a bond and override. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Be interesting to see that data and to maybe even get that out there for folks who, when we said, hey, you know what, we'd love to continue to pay our teachers at a reasonable rate. We're below the state average in one of the lowest states in the country, and people said, no, absolutely not. It'd be interesting for them to realize that even while they were paying for the bond and the override, we were paying less than our neighboring communities.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cat and mouse thing, because if your tax rate is higher, which it is in our neighboring districts, but your assessed value is lower, it kind of, you know, a percent on $100 is, you know, is $1, and percent on the 2% on $80 is.
Yeah. So if you're what you're saying is if your house is worth less money, you pay less taxes.
Yeah.
I think most people get that.
Yeah.
And the opposite is true, of course, as well, right? If your house
Correct.
is worth more, you pay higher taxes.
Yeah.
But as a percent of the property, of the value of my property, I'm still paying less when I'm paying for our bond and override plus our regular tax rate than our neighboring communities are.
Yep.
The other thing I'll offer up is the numbers are wonderful, and thank you for sharing them. And if we meet back here in a year and go over the overview, I'd love to see how this has impacted the learning environments, whether it's leaky roofs or whatever it is, because I think that helps me at least, and probably our community, understand what this is about, which is ultimately an environment conducive to learning and safety. And I have to ask about the energy savings, and I know that we look at the monetary value. I'm also curious about some of the other values when we save energy, and you may not have these numbers, but I'm curious about those numbers more specifically in terms of sustainability in general as related to energy consumption.
Brian, we could have Fusebox come in and share.
Yeah.
We work with a company that helps us look at that all the time.
Cool.
And,
Yeah, they input all over utility bills.
Great data, great numbers. Over the years, they've found leaks that were underground we didn't know about. And so there's some pretty neat information about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Brian.
Exciting stuff.
Are there any requests to speak? No. Thank you.
See, they came just for that. And now they can leave.
All right. We move now into our study and voting session, and we get to hear from Brian again. So he's going to talk about the annual financial report and a couple others.
All right. Let me gather myself for a second. Turn my computer back on. All right. So this is the end of the fiscal year. It starts with planning in January, doing a projection estimate of how many kids we're going to have, because we don't know exactly what our M&O budget is, what that pot, how big it is until the kids show up and we get your 100-day ADM. In July, we do a proposed and adopted budget on that projection. If we're off by 1% to the lower, like we taxed for too much or we thought our budget was going to be too high, you have to do a budget revision in December, and then everybody is required to do a budget revision in May. And that ends the budget, and then these reports are the actuals. It's the actual expenditures. And so there's three. The regular AFR is every single pot of money, every grant, state, federal, our M&O budget, our DAA, which is our capital pot of money we get based on our ADM, our 301 teacher compensation money. It's exactly in every spot that it was spent to the dollar, and we get audited on this information, cross-reference our accounting system, and this is for your preview. It's an exciting document that I get to understand, but anyone who's not in my position usually looks at it and goes, I have no idea what this is saying. So that's the FR. If you were able to look at it and had questions on it, it is just really taking what we budgeted and putting the actuals to it. It does mirror the format of our budgets, and in every cell, we should be budgeting at least what we're spending, and that's also cross-referenced with our auditors.
Did we have any oddities that we spent way more than we budgeted last year?
You know, there was a couple oddities that I will get, because what happens is the Auditor General looks at this, and if there's anything that swings more than a few percents from the previous year, they will call and they will want an explanation. So one of them was in what's called our our instructional support category of spending for M&O. And that's part of, if you remember, classroom spending has the instructional and directly with the kids, and the student support, that's speech language pathologists and nurses, and then you have the instructional support. We took 100% of our instructional coaches out of our 301 money and put them into our M&O budget, and so 100% was going towards teacher compensation, and that jacked that category up big time. I'll get a call and ask if it was a mistake. So that was something that stuck out. Our regular ed instructional teacher amount went up quite a bit. I looked at that, and it was, we hired teachers that left, teachers came with more experience. And so we were actually paying more for our turnover, and so that was an oddity. Other than those two, I think those were the only ones.
And just because I always get confused, this is the final budget for.
It's not the budget. It is for last year. It's the final report for last year.
The final report, but it was for.
It was for last year.
Mm-hmm.
It was for every penny we spent for health insurance. It is last year's actuals.
Okay.
All right, any questions on that before I move to the explanation of the next one?
Just one thing that struck me is that the actual either tracks really nicely with what was budgeted, or it's under in most of the circumstances. And I think that that is a tribute to some of that frugality, efficiency, whatever, the ability of this team to put together and recommend a budget to us that really maximizes the reality of what needs to be spent. So I think that is cause for celebration to be able to estimate spending.
We got a great
appropriately.
process. And even when we do our budget, we use the previous year's actuals to really drive what that new budget is, given the fluctuations of what's in that budget package that you vote on in March. Then I'll tweak those actuals from the previous year, because we know we'll spend more money because we brought it forward in the budget package, whether that's a raise or a new position. So it's a good process.
And I just want to be sure, I don't know why this is in my brain.
Okay.
But with the override ending, are we in danger of losing people
No.
as a result? Okay.
No, when I say no, because I say that because there's not a defining event that will change one of our existing employees to say, I need to go. Because when that override and that $1 million went away, we didn't adjust anyone's pay downward to make up that money.
Okay.
We relied on our carry forward and our frugalness to continue the 5.1% raise from 2016.
And this isn't going to be an issue that we'll have to deal with letting people go? Do you anticipate?
No.
We didn't have that
No,
much
every
this
year,
year.
every year we
We
go
didn't
through a
have that much
staffing
this year.
model, and then what we do is in January, I'll break it down to ADM and students and grade levels and schools. We'll look at our staff. We will prioritize our priorities when it comes to what do we want for the next year. We always raises, class size, programs.
Right.
You get any one of those three out of whack, you do lose people, and you do lose students. And I think we balance those well. So we will try to get as much of a raise. Like I said, we have had our carry forward go up every single year because the actuals,
Right.
when compared to how much money we
Yeah.
got from our ADM, we are now at that point where when we look at things, we'll have to look at possibly adjusting within the district based on class size and numbers and things.
So don't expect our carry forward to be increasing.
Right. And that's a really insightful question you're asking, Andy. 10 years ago, I think the answer to that question would have been very different. We were in kind of survival mode. The synergy between our CFO and our superintendent and our district admin team and the board the last few years in terms of the proactive budgeting that we do and whatnot, and the cost savings that we've affected in several different areas is huge. It's just a totally different, watching this as a teacher, really interested in things, and then as a principal for years, and then being part of this district admin team for the last several years, it's really cool to see how efficiently we use the money that we're given. We, like Brian says, even though, excuse me, we don't have 5.1% of teacher salaries coming to us through the override, we've squeezed the balloon and found that in other areas. And 10 years ago, the answer to that would have been no. We're going to have to do some cuts. We're going to have to let people go. But where we've done our cutting is being very efficient in other areas and being proactive and looking ahead at things. And it's a pretty cool thing. Not all districts are in that situation. We're very lucky to have a board with great foresight and a terrific CFO, a terrific superintendent, and a good district admin team who support those things, and it's put us in a good spot right now.
Well, and I want to echo, I just think you've done a great job with the finances of our district and the people and everything, and I think we just need to be sure. I just want to be sure I'm thinking ahead to what might happen, and hopefully I don't have to deal with that.
Here's something we can't do. We can't take that amount of money, that 5.1% of teacher salaries, and make that grow even farther toward the state average. So we're not able to attract quite the folks that we would be able to, or perhaps retain quite the folks we were able to, because our community said, no, we're done supporting the school district in that way.
So the things within our control, we've learned over the years, sometimes through hard knocks. I mean, we had 5 years of really hard cuts before we figured out how to turn this, but the things that I worry about are, I don't know what $85 million in vouchers is going to do to our entire system, but that's a little bit beyond the control of the people in this room right now. There's things like that to worry about for sure. And enrollment, always. But I also think we have a pretty tight eye on that, and we understand our community. We've been watching for years and trying to help control enrollment in terms of watching families leave town and trying to make it better for them to come into town and that whole type of thing. I know there's been a lot of rhetoric out there in the community about our enrollment being down, and none of that's true. I think we've already presented on that and showed the other side of that. But those are the things that you have to worry about for cuts. What's the state going to do to us?
Right.
And how's our enrollment? I believe our enrollment's pretty stable, but although, yes, for 30 years we've been trending down the number of students who live in this town. So no conspiracy theory behind that. There's real straight data to show that. That's going to always be a struggle for us until something changes with community culture in terms of family affordability and jobs and things like that, which we're also very involved in as a district in trying to help drive that in the community.
That's a great point. The cool, almost surprising part of that is even in that environment, like you're talking about, with no accountability vouchers and tons of charter schools and fewer kids in Prescott all the time over at least the last decade, we're a growing district last 3 years in a row. Yeah. That's pretty cool and almost surprising. People like the product that we're putting out there, which is great to know.
Thank you.
Anything else for Brian on that piece of it? I know you're not done.
I know.
Go for it.
All right. They do also make us do a food service AFR. Just breaks down the actuals of our food service. how many meals we served, what the costs were, what was the breakdown of our expenses, how much was our food service management contract when it came to our Southwest Food Excellence contract. Pretty straightforward. Well, it's dollars and straightforward to me. So if you have any questions on that.
You were here right before we had the food service, were you not, when we did it ourselves?
I was within the district and have been since 2004, but.
Are we still seeing a savings doing the food service?
Oh, yeah,
Not doing it
yes.
ourselves?
In fact, in the last 2 years, we've gotten ourselves in trouble as a food service. Food service is a federal program, and you can't be for profit. And so you can't carry a balance of more than 3 months' worth of operating expenses. Otherwise, you're considered for profit. And with the last 2 years, with everybody being free, and the numbers that we were serving within the community, we got a call from the 80 food powers of be going, you need to spend money. And so we've put forward a spending plan to spend $500,000 on new equipment within the kitchens. And we made money this year. So we're going to be called again after this year and said, you have too much money, can't be for profit, you have to spend it. So SFE's done a good job.
Nice, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a lot of dollar signs. I'm wondering if you have a sense for like how many meals did we serve last year?
It's actually on there. Let me pull that up.
311,000 for lunch.
Yes. So yeah, there's a box and it's actually right above where it shows last year as well. Why can't I find it?
Yeah, I think that's a profound number for me. It helps me realize that our schools are literally on the front lines of a basic human need of eating. And I think it's incredible seeing that combined with breakfast, but also the a la carte. I mean, we're looking at, like, you can probably do that math faster than me, but close to 500,000 meals.
It's a lot, especially, I mean, we always want to see more breakfasts because we know kids are a lot of kids are not being fed at home, and that starts the day off right. So we want to see that higher. But yeah, I mean, you're talking 420 some thousand meals that we served between breakfast and lunch. And we just renewed our Southwest Food Excellence contract for the next 5 years. We're going to be meeting with them and talking about, renewed look at, the food and the bar that, they're saying that they're providing, and we are feeding a lot of kids. I've eaten their food.
Not bad.
I had a barbecue chicken pizza over at the high school the other day. I'm like, this was pretty good. So.
And then we have the school level.
I got nothing for you on that.
And this is new, right?
This is the third. I think the first year, the federal government mandated this, and the state had no idea how to respond. So I think there was one 3 years ago, but it was like, hey, is this good enough for the first year? And then the last 2 years. Luckily, there's a template, and you can dump your accounting data in there. Essentially, in our accounting system, there is 3 numbers that designate a site. And so what it does is it breaks down every expense to that site. But the issue and the complexity of this is we have so many expenditures that are on the district level. Transportation. We don't track Abaya Judd's transportation costs. It's impossible. Just so many things. And so what it does is you have to then prorate all those district costs amongst the schools using some type of methodology, and we use ADM. So the high school gets hit with the most because they have the most kids. And this is one of the reports that comes out of it, and it's basically what the spending is per site. And it also breaks it down by SPED, how much money each student at that school brings with their Group B category versus how much do we spend at that school on SPED staff. And I don't know, it's almost too much. And if you have questions on it, you can ask, but it's a formality because it really doesn't tell us a lot, except for we spend a lot of money on our kids in good areas.
And Brian's been locked in his office for 2 weeks. We haven't seen him come or go.
No, 2 weeks ago, I said, don't invite me to any meetings. I've been locked in my office for the last 4 weeks on these.
Oh, okay.
2 weeks was when I start sweating because this is actually only 3. There's 7 more that I have to do that doesn't have to go to the governing board. And so I start looking at deadlines and say, Joe, I can't. Don't invite me anywhere. So, and he looks at me and he says, every year you panic. And I say, Joe, there's a reason. So,
Why did a report like this come to being,
I have
to the
no
best
idea.
of our knowledge?
I have no idea. I really don't.
Politics?
I think so. I mean,
Transparency.
I don't think that there's anything when it comes to what we present and what we have, the AFR in itself. I mean, I could tell you a story with every single one of those boxes and where the money's spent. I can pull it up for anyone who asks. I can take that box on how much we spent on instruction, in purchased services, and tell you every single PO that made up those money. I don't know. It's almost getting, there's another nasty one. It's a COVID spending. Which they changed this year to say whether or not you would have had this expense had COVID happened or not, which was a political change to that report, which was ridiculous. And that one's done and uploaded. I'm glad I don't have to see it for another year.
Any other questions for Brian?
That is it for this.
All right. We need to vote on this. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll move that we approve the 2021-2022 annual financial report and the 2021-2022 food service annual financial report and the 2021-2022 school level annual financial reports as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve these 3 21-22 financial reports. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we move on now to the second reading of the proposed policy changes.
Yeah, this one's a quick, short one, really. Came in July, and it's around Jake's Law, which created a fund that provides uninsured and underinsured kiddos access to behavioral health services. And so that's based on some new legislation. And so this policy is bringing together previous laws and new laws to make sure that the schools, when they refer a student to this, that all the bases are covered in terms of working with parents and opt-in and opt-out type thing and the whole deal. So that's a pretty straightforward one, but happy to have conversation or dig into it as the board wishes.
Questions?
Just to make sure I'm tracking, these are reacting to legislation. We're not discussing necessarily our opinions on whether
The legislation should have
it's
been
really
passed.
just
No,
You
we
can't.
don't get to,
follow the law or not.
we
Right.
don't get to
Okay.
weigh in on that.
Yeah, we, pretty much a lot of that legislation says now you need to have policy on these new laws. So,
Yeah.
so this is that reaction to it. And this helps kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So motion to adopt the proposed changes to Policy Services Advisory Volume 34, Number 1, Number 716 from July 2022 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the proposed changes in Policy Services Advisory Volume 34, Number 1, Number 716, from July 2022 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, the next set of policy
Yes,
advisories.
much more comprehensive, volume 34, number 2, August 2022. This is the big piece of legislation. As we looked at these as a team, not tons of changes to us. A lot of this are political statements about things that are already in law and that are already in place, such as how we'll do school visits. And I actually appreciate that one, even though I don't know if the basis behind it was thoughtful or helpful. But, it does just reiterate that a parent just can't come in and say, I want to visit now, take me in. There are some procedures around not disrupting schools and So that was reiterated. A lot of those things were reiterated in here. But, you know, all of these policy updates are needed due to law, like you just said, but the topics basically in general, and then we can dig into anything if you want. I know you've had a month looking at them, but student surveys, visitors to schools, parent involvement in education, family life education, immunizations, communicable infectious diseases, staff health and safety accounting system, basic instructional program, school counselors and psychologists, hazing, graduation requirements, intramural sports. That pretty much covers the generalities of it. And we'll get something like this big every year after the legislative session, depending on what their focus was. So,
Were there any of the items that you saw that indicated a major change in policy for us?
no, I mean, there were some that we were concerned about and read through and talked through with district leadership team, like student surveys. We don't see any big changes there. You know, parental involvement, you know, that's been
Yeah.
rules and laws for a long time, and so we're in line with that. So no major changes.
Questions, comments on any of these policies?
Just one question that confused me when I read it. It's on the hazing policy. And it says, in accord with statute, violations of this policy do not include either of the following: customary athletic events, contests, or competitions that are sponsored by an educational institution, or B, any activity or conduct that furthers the goals of a legitimate educational curriculum, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not sure, how do I interpret that? A customary athletic event, I don't know exactly what that would mean. Is it addressing hazing at an event? Like hazing that might happen in a locker room at an event?
Yeah, I think that's where the most problems have been over the years in the country. The major change I saw in this policy was that it ties it to another law which makes it, if it is deemed hazing, it automatically makes it a misdemeanor. That's the biggest change I saw in that one. But in terms of the reach of it in our schools, I don't feel like that's changed. I mean, it's really anything that we're doing that our kids are involved in that could roll into a hazing type situation. Am I touching on that, or?
I just, it felt when I read it, and maybe I'm interpreting this wrong, is that anything associated with an athletic event or a school activity could not include hazing. And maybe I'm reading that wrong, but that's what I know hazing occurred. That's where I know hazing occurred, was in relation with athletic events typically.
Right.
So it just, the wording of it, my brain didn't function properly, I guess, in reading that, because I'm still not sure. Are we excluding athletic events from this policy?
Oh, I don't think so.
I didn't read it that way.
Okay.
I read it kind of as the reach of typical type situations that we need to watch closely.
Okay.
I compare it to kind of like when we have discipline on the bus. Where is our jurisdiction when we're at bus stops and things like that? So this could occur at a camp at another school that we sent our, we have football teams come up and do camp here.
Right.
Those schools are responsible for what's happening while they're at camp. That's kind of how I was reading that, Andy.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question about, we have a policy now that should we adopt to this and stay legal and constitutional, how are we checking the biological sex of all of the athletes for our sports?
Yeah, and I've talked to board members individually about this as well, but we deal with those on an individual basis, and that has served us very well. Typically, those families want us to know what their situation is and want to know what's going to be the smoothest path for their child. But we know. We know, and coaches know. We have relationships with our kids and our families, and typically they come to us and say, what are our options here? So I suppose there could be times where you don't know, but we will not be checking.
Every student who enrolls with us, a birth certificate is required, so we do have that information. But Joe's exactly right. If there's a situation where there's a young lady who wants to play on a boys' team or whatnot, we deal with that on an individual basis. But as far as your question, how do we check somebody's biological sex? It's on the birth certificate that is required when people enroll.
Copy that. It's a little problematic to me because it seems like an unworkable policy, but I accept that, that's how the law is worded, so I understand why we'll be adopting that today, or probably. I also I know Deb asked the question of are there any significant changes that we weren't already doing? And I feel that it's important to express that when we have local control and make those decisions as a school district, it seems like we do a pretty good job of being in line with the standards that, in my opinion, it seems the state is passing down onto us. This just adds a level of bureaucracy and less discernment and control for our own personal circumstances and decisions. So.
I'll tell you, if you look at it over the last 30 years, or when I talked to my dad about, did you even really have a policy manual back in 1985? To where we're at now with how litigious our society is and how political, how politics has reached into our schools and taken away local control. It's quite a story. Maybe one of us needs to write about it someday.
It doesn't feel good, and it feels distrustful of the ability for this team, this district, this community to make decisions for what's best for us.
Anything else on the policies? If not, could I get a motion, please?
I'll move that we adopt the proposed changes in Policy Services Advisory Volume 34, number 2, numbers 717 to 736 from August 2022 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the proposed changes in Policy Services Advisory Volume 34, number 2, number 717 to 736 from August 2022 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Next item is the school calendar for next year.
We got Kelsey chatting about that for us. We've got a lot of the focus of the changes are around maximizing our professional development. So ask Kelsey to talk about that.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of changes on here. However, when we were looking at the calendar, we thought it was a terrific opportunity to look at our professional development days and where they fell and really what our needs were. And so we did adjust a few of them on here for the proposed calendar. And most of them have to do with first semester. So we really looked at what are our needs first quarter, and our list of priorities and things to do first quarter is quite lengthy, especially when you look at adding new staff and getting them onboarded. And so we knew that we had 3 days of pre-service, which are always jam-packed with back-to-school events, getting people ready to start the school year. But we really needed a professional development day that was closer to the start of school, where we could allow teachers and staff that time to collaborate and work on curriculum and set a plan for the entire year. Our first professional development day was just last Friday, and so we're already at that point almost through with first quarter. And so our proposal is to move that up to coordinate with Labor Day. So we wanted to continue to offer those longer weekends for families that they could maximize their time off. And so just moving that up to just a month after school starts. That allows us time to plan parent-teacher conferences, but it also allows for a lot of opportunity for collaboration around content and curriculum. Our other change was we were looking at we have a full day, or we have had a full day of PD in May, and that was always too late to really add something new, but too early where we didn't have our end of year assessments to look at data and to plan for the following year. So we were always trying to fill that, and we always did. There were things to do, but it wasn't maximizing that time that we had. So our proposal is to actually move that into second quarter, where again, we can continue with that traction with instruction and really helping our teachers to be as effective as possible early in the year, as early in the year as possible. And so you will see that we added a full day PD. We just flipped that into second quarter. And those were the main changes that you'll see on here.
When you say changes, you're talking about as compared to this year's calendar?
As compared to this year's.
This wasn't something we previously published or gave
Right,
to the board?
yeah,
Got it.
just
Thanks.
to, yeah, the last couple of years, it's been pretty consistent.
Got it.
Are those changes informed by teacher feedback?
Teacher and building principal, yes. I've had conversations with all of the principals, definitely talked with instructional coaches to make sure that that was the need that we were seeing, but I used a lot of my own experience from being in the classroom and from being a building principal to help inform that as well.
Any weird holiday changes, you know, like Christmas on a
Much better.
Wednesday? Or
No,
Much
I
better
know,
this time.
it looks better
Yes,
this year.
next year is pretty typical for what we see for Christmas break.
Yeah.
And our spring break does align with Yavapai College, which
That's
typically
good.
aligns with the other school districts
Yeah.
in our neighboring school districts.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the calendar?
I know other districts have been anxious for our board to vote
Yeah,
on this. They
to do
typically
this.
follow suit
Yeah.
with whatever PUSD does.
Oh, let's wait.
Up to you.
Motion to approve the 2023-2024 PUSD district academic calendar as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2023-2024 PUSD district academic calendar as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next one is approving the School Facilities Oversight Board payments for,
More money allocated or earmarked for the district, which is good. Previously, I think it was 2 of the sites, leaky roof money was brought to the board, and they approved after that the other 5. And then also approved a new fire alarm panel at Mile High. We're actually going through the process of having the system analyzed and possibly asking for them to replace the whole system, hopefully, because that I think that'll be about $600,000 if they fund that. So this represents about $66,000 of SFB allocated money. That need your vote on the terms and conditions.
Brian, why do we have so many roof leaks?
Because our newest roof is Taylor Hicks, which at that time they didn't require, I think, what is it called, flash. So essentially, there's no layer between the roof and what's
ceiling,
underneath,
yeah.
and so if water gets through, it doesn't.
Okay.
There isn't anything to divert it to off the roof, and our roofs are. We are in the process of having them approve assessments of 4 of our worst roofs to hopefully have them replaced. Lincoln's the worst, actually, out of all of them.
So
And-
our roofs were originally built between 4 and 12 decades ago
Yeah.
is part of that answer as well, I think.
But when we get these repairs done, is it just a
It's a Band-Aid,
stopgap?
absolutely. It's a Band-Aid
Okay.
on most of them. It's because the standard has changed between our last roof and what it is now. Once the surface is compromised,
Yeah.
the water finds its way in, and so you find a leak. In fact, they did at Taylor Hicks. They went and did a comprehensive leak, plugged them. Next rainstorm, 4 more places in the building were dripping, and you're chasing your tail. But in this case, we're chasing our tail with SFB money rather than district money.
Just out of curiosity, what would it take to rebuild a roof?
Oh, boy. A lot.
I suspected that.
I think when the high school had theirs redone,
Yeah.
on just the main building, I think that was $1 million just for that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but we're pushing forward with SFB. I mean,
Yeah.
even if we had an assess, because the process is you have to have it assessed, and then you have to have a company do a design build on it. Because all the HVACs are on our roofs, they have to look at the structural aspects of them, and then you have to go out to bid. So even if we got permission to have a new roof on one of our buildings, we are a year out from even just having material available for one of our contractors. So we're going to push for 4 of them. I think it's Lincoln, Taylor Hicks, Granite. I think it's Mile High.
Okay.
So
Many other organizations with buildings, the age of our buildings, tear them down and move on.
Yeah.
The city of Prescott's got a city hall, which some people think is historic, other people think it's not. But it's the same age as our second newest school, and the roof leaks so badly that the building has been compromised, and they're going to sell it and tear it down and move into a new city hall. We don't have that option because
Yeah.
we don't get nearly enough money to do things like that, so we keep patching.
but if we get a new roof, and I was reminded, it's a water and ice shield that they are now mandated to put that defers the flow elsewhere. So anyway, hopefully we'll have new roofs in a year or 2.
Well,
Prescott High School's flat
mean to
roof
keep you here all
was a
night.
story in its own,
Yeah.
which we'll tell some other time, but I'll just give you a little hint. It had a lake in between the top and the ceiling that we had special drains to drain out, but
All right.
that'll be in the book later.
Any other questions on the roofs?
I'll move that we approve the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions for acceptance of monies from the Building Renewal Grant Fund for PUSD school sites as presented.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the School Facilities Oversight Board terms and conditions for acceptance of monies from the Building Renewal Grant Fund for PUSD school sites as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, Mr. Neese.
Well, I get to be Mr. Neese.
Hi, Mr. Neese.
Yeah. I'll do my best. I can't sing, to be fair, and he really can.
Yeah, well,
So I am here representing Mr. Neese tonight for a out-of-state travel request. He would like to take his choir to Buena Park, California, and by the way, that should be March 23rd through the 26th of 2023. Okay, so just to clarify that, but they'd be going to a music festival in this upcoming March.
It's the wrong wording on the voting.
Am I okay? Okay, I'm sorry. So it looks like it would be about 15 to 20 students, which would consist of both choirs. He sees it as a real opportunity to continue to help try and grow the program, and the cost would be $80 per student, and that would include a visit to Knott's Berry Farm, so it sounds pretty fun.
is it student funded? I mean, are they paying for themselves to go?
Yeah, they would pay for themselves. Though I'm sure there's, options if somebody is not.
Yeah. Any other questions? Could I get a motion?
Motion to approve an out-of-state travel request for Mr. Scott Neese, music teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS choir students to Buena Park, California, March 23rd through 26th, 2023, and participate in a music festival as presented.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve an out-of-state travel request from Mr. Scott Neese, music teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS choir students to Buena Park, California, March 23rd to 26th, 2023, and participate in a music festival as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Who would you like to be now?
Whoever you guys want.
Okay. Well, Ms. Hammer,
Sure, why not? So yeah, I am also here to request the next group of tours that's become quite a hot commodity at Prescott High School. These guys are the ones that are heading to, and not necessarily the same ones, but the same group putting it together who's heading to Japan in the spring, and they are looking at their next trip. So the next one that they are looking at here would be a trip to Scotland and Ireland in spring of 2024. They might be able to visit someone. Yeah. And so it's really the exact same type of trip working through. They would have a chaperone for every 6 students. They would end up with somewhere between 15 and 70 students attending this trip. I would assume that it will probably lean towards the higher, seeing as though the popularity of the last 2. And so, and it looks like another amazing opportunity for our kids to see the world, and excuse my jealousy. So.
okay. Marine science, are they gonna do anything with marine science?
No, that just happens to be what she teaches. Yeah, so Miss Hammer, who organizes this group and works with this EF Tours, is a science teacher for us.
All right.
And it looks like they're going to Belfast as well, so according to the map
Yeah,
at least.
that's what
So-
it said in the description.
It's Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Scotland.
Yeah,
That's
looks like
kinda
they have
cool. They get 3 different countries.
pretty impressive 7-day trip in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do we also have financial support options potentially for students?
Yeah, this one, because of the company that they work with, they actually have ways to help kids and families with need to be able to take part. And I wish I had the number of kids who were traveling to the Japan trip to help you get an idea of how that worked out. But we definitely have a lot of interested students and families. I mean, there's a lot of parents who decide to be chaperones and travel along as well. So it's a really exciting thing.
Including fundraising options, right?
Yes, they have fundraising. They have this. That's part of the advantage of this EF Tours, is that they help with all of those pieces to make it more feasible for our kids, and they organize the trip and all the other important pieces.
Any other questions? Could I get a motion, please?
I'll move that we approve an out-of-country travel request from Ms. Catherine Hammer, biology and marine science teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS students to Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Ireland over spring break 2024 as presented.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we consider approving an out-of-country travel request from Ms. Catherine Hammer, biology and marine science teacher at Prescott High School, to take PHS students to Scotland and Ireland over spring break and Northern Ireland in spring 2024 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, last item on our voting agenda is considering a pay raise for long-term subs. Clark?
All right, I'll give you the short version here, but I will mention, as far as the last item is concerned, first time I met Mr. Clever here, who is a member of the Mountain CTED board and a good friend of ours and a great advocate for education, was when his family and I went to Japan on one of these EF tours several years ago. That was a great experience. So substitute teachers employed by PUSD, we have substitute teachers who work in our classrooms every day. Most of them are employed by a company called Educational Services Incorporated. The county helps, so a third-party agency, the county helps organize that, and those subs go to Humboldt and to Chino and to us and to Seligman and whatnot. We're talking here about people who have substitute teacher certificates who are actually employed by Prescott Unified School District. You probably recall we've got some folks that we refer to as designated substitute teachers or long-term guest teachers at each of the schools. The board approved that a couple of years ago as COVID came on. We had a significant increase in the need for substitute teachers. That's been terrific. I will, Mr. Neely, I'm sure can back this up. Every one of our principals says, oh my gosh, that has been a godsend. It's just saved us to have people who are employed by the district doing that. We're not talking about those designated sub folks. Those folks get paid at our highest sub rate, $130 per day, and they are actually employed by the district, like I say, directly, so they receive benefits as well, health care and whatnot. It's a significant savings over if we had a regular teacher salary teacher in those positions, but it helps out a ton, filling holes immediately rather than having to go to the sub pool, which thins out all the time on the county level. As Yavapai County gets a little bit older and less interested in helping out in schools, to have somebody in our schools who say, yep, okay, Mrs. Stockton, I need you here today. Mrs. Anderson, I need you over there tomorrow, that type of thing. So that's worked out great. In addition to that, we've got a couple of people, we've actually only have 3 at this point, who work for us that are teachers of record. They're actually, I'm the science teacher at Mile High Middle School in this classroom, or I'm the math and science teacher over at Granite Mountain, whatnot, who don't have their regular teacher certificate at this point. They've got a substitute teacher certificate, and we're plugging a hole there. We looked for a regularly certified teacher. We're unable to find one, but we did have somebody with a substitute teacher certificate who said, I'll do that for you. In 2 of the cases, it's people who are within months of finishing their bachelor's degree and being eligible for their full teacher certificate, so they're in the last couple of months of their teacher training programs. In one case, it's somebody who's already finished their bachelor's degree who's in the middle of going through a teacher training program, but each of them have substitute teacher certificates. Each of these 3 people currently is in a situation that we think we're probably going to find more in the future, where we have to plug holes at the last minute. A lot of districts don't plug the holes at all. We're fortunate to find people who are qualified, who are right on the cusp of being regularly certified as teachers, who say, yeah, we'll help you out. We didn't used to do this very much, but we've got 3 at this point, and we're paying those folks $130 a day, where as the person who's doing the very same thing, they're doing all the lesson planning, all the grading, all the parent interface, all of the meetings with fellow staff members, et cetera, right next door, getting paid, if they're our lowest paid teacher, about $214 a day. So there's a huge gap between what we're paying a certain segment of our teachers, our regular classroom teachers, and other classroom teachers. So as we talked about this on the district admin level, we thought we need to do something to get those currently 3 folks, and again, future folks, so attracting folks in the future where we have a gap to fill, and we go to somebody and we say, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And they say, yeah, how much? We say $130 a day. They say, no, thank you. We'd like to get closer to that. At the same time, we want to continue to provide an incentive for these people to get fully certified with a standard teacher certificate. So we don't want to move them all the way to the regular teacher salary scale at this point. So we looked and we said, okay, what's the median point between $130, the highest we pay subs, and about $214 a day, the lowest we pay regular teachers? It's $170. So it would be a substantial daily pay increase for folks in that situation. I think it will help us to retain folks better. We actually started the school year with 5 people in this situation. 2 of them have resigned since. I don't know in all cases it was because of pay, but higher pay might have helped retain those folks. And it will help us attract folks in the future when we do have this kind of last minute need. Again, it's not plan A. Plan A is always find a regularly certified teacher, but we can't always do that in all cases. So sometimes we find a university senior who's just about done with their program, and we get them a sub-cert, and they come and help us out. So we're proposing to move the current pay level from where it is with all other substitutes to halfway between that and what our regular teachers get paid.
Would this have any impact on our contract with the YCESA?
Great question. No, so those are folks who don't work directly for
Yeah.
Prescott Unified School District, so we're not proposing an additional, the board just last year approved an increase in that subpay, and we are competitive right at or above our neighboring school districts, and we've been in pretty good shape getting folks as they're available.
Do any of our neighboring districts have a similar position, and if so, how are we comparing with them?
That is a great question. I'm not positive if that's the case. I do know that 2 of our neighboring districts have called me up in the last few months and asked how our designated sub program works, and I've told them it's been great. Actually, our board was really forward-thinking and improving that, and our principals have given super feedback. Have they moved on that? I don't know for sure. That's a great question.
It says in the proposal that the dollar figure suggested is not an additional cost to the budget, but most likely a savings because there is already a teacher position on hold? Is that-
Right, yeah, so great, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I forgot to mention that. So again, if there were a regularly certified teacher in that position, the pay per day would be anything from $214 to $260 or something like that, depending on where the teacher is at on the salary scale. So over that, we're still affecting a significant cost savings, even though we're looking at paying them more than we currently are. So again, there's a retention piece of folks that we currently have or will have in the future, and then an attracting piece. But it's still, as is mentioned in the material that you've got, is a savings over a regular teacher. Again, not Plan A. We're not looking to do this on the cheap.
Okay.
We're looking to get a regular teacher where we can, but if we can't, we want to pay people fairly and give them a reason to come to us and stay with us.
Okay,
But
thanks.
does this perhaps feed Plan A of getting a certified person in that position because then they might stick around and stay once they are certified? Have we seen that progression?
Yeah, great question. We did have 2 people last year who were long-term subs with us that got their regular teacher cert and are with us now. So yes, certainly, yeah, it could certainly feed Plan A. That's the idea, is that these folks would start with us, and if they do a great job and we rarely have a teacher who comes to us and doesn't say, wow, this is a good place to work. We're fortunate that way. So when people come and they get with us, they usually feel like, if I'm going to keep teaching for the amount that I get paid in Arizona, I want to do it here in Prescott.
Other questions? Could I get a motion, please? I'll move that we consider raising the pay for teacher of record long-term substitute teachers from $130 to $170 per day to support recruiting and retaining the most qualified personnel possible.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we raise pay for teacher of record long-term substitute teachers from $130 to $170 per day to support recruiting and retaining the most quality personnel possible. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we will move on to our information and discussion items. Mr. Moore, do you have a school board summary budget report for us?
I do, and I know you guys always have so many questions about this, but I'll say as presented, unless you want to continue that trend of asking questions, or you can just say, okay.
That's the most you've ever said.
I know, it's actually, it is. And
All right.
I was being a little sarcastic
Thank
there.
you. Any community comments anybody would like to share? Barring that, future agenda items. First of all, I would point out that next week is fall break in PUSD. So have a nice vacation. And then we have our work-study retreat scheduled for Friday, October 28th at 8 a.m. in this room. And then our regular study and voting session is November 1st, so it's the first day of the month, so don't forget, at 5 o'clock. With that, we are adjourned.